10 seconds to go. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, with your permission, I would like to intervene and say a few words in regard to the various matters that have been discussed in the House. My colleague, the Finance Minister, who is in charge of this budget, will no doubt deal with the specific matters that have been raised in the course of this debate. I need hardly remind the House of the fact that although this budget is the individual responsibility of the finance minister, it is also the responsibility of the entire government, and as Prime Minister, I am entirely responsible for it as well as any other member of the government. This budget was placed before the House after the usual consideration by the government, and we are completely committed to it. That does not mean that we are not willing to consider any new proposals. Certainly, we are willing to do so long as the basic structure of the budget is not affected. My friend has pointed out various difficulties in the way of our debate here and in the way of consideration of the budget proposals. He pointed out how little could be done in the allotted time. I am in complete agreement with him in this matter. If there are any practical proposals which would enable us to give more time for the consideration of these problems, either formally or informally, I am quite sure that the finance minister will gladly consider them. The real difficulty is, however, more basic, and it is this: the kind of problems which the government has to face now is so vast that it is impossible for any democratic parliamentary assembly to give enough time for its consideration. It is just a question of time. This is not a new difficulty. I remember that long debates on this subject took place in a country like the United Kingdom, where they found that they could not get along with a very old procedure in this 20th century of continuous crisis, social problems, and so on. So, even parliamentary procedure in the United Kingdom has gradually changed, and many matters are left more to the committees than to the House itself. Usually, a principle is decided by the House and its working is left to the committees. The House cannot find time to consider everything. This has been the difficulty for a long time. If we can find a remedy for it, it will not only be good for us, but also it will be an example for other democratic countries who are seeking such remedies. In spite of the fact that Parliament is in continuous session, it is not able to find time to consider in detail all the important matters. We have, in fact, much less time because we are not in continuous session. I suppose our sessions will inevitably become longer and longer so as to enable us to deal with more and more problems and have more and more discussions. Anyhow, I have stated what the difficulty is at present, though I am in sympathy with what my friend said. I have no easy remedy for that difficulty except to say that we are very much prepared to consider any ideas or suggestions so as to give greater facilities for more intensive discussion of any great problem. An honorable member referred to the budget speech as being a directly or indirect survey of all manner of problems. The House can hardly expect the Finance Minister's budget speech to be a survey of all these tremendous problems, although they have no doubt some bearing on the budget. The world is becoming far too complex and difficult for us to be able to keep the full picture in view. As I listened to the honorable member who spoke just now, I was wondering whether we had the larger picture in mind or were getting lost in few minor and secondary matters. For instance, the honorable member went on to say certain things in regard to our bringing forward a bill for giving pension to the president that signified to me an approach which is totally wrong. Besides, I would have thought that the subject of pension for the president was hardly a matter for debate or reference here. If this country is starving, even then you have to provide pension to the president. The honorable member perhaps prefers starvation for the president and himself. Certainly, I will not stand in his way. But we are considering much more serious matters than this, and the fact that such points are raised shows that we are not looking at the problems. We do not seem to be thinking of the vast problems that we are faced with in respect of our economy in the present economic situation of the world. The honorable member who has just spoken has dealt with certain wider questions which appear to go beyond the scope of the present bill, which is a short bill before the House. The House will remember that when this commission was appointed, they were entrusted with two tasks. One was to examine the whole income tax procedure and suggest ways and means to prevent evasion in future. Secondly, they were to examine specific cases which were referred to them. What the honorable member has been saying really refers to the first part, which is the wider question. As has been stated in the Statement of Objects and Regions, we have received from the Income Tax Investigation Commission recommendations on this wider issue, and they will no doubt come up before the House in the form of a measure, and the House will then have full opportunity of considering them, adding to them, or altering them so that we might evolve a proper procedure. The sole question before the House now is what to do with the inquiry part of the Commission's work with regard to certain cases that were referred to them. Now, I would request the House to remember that this is not a detailed inquiry. This inquiry has been confined to a certain number of specific cases referred to them up to a certain date, and no further cases can come up before them. Apart from that, a fair number of the cases that have been referred to them have been disposed of, and a large number still remains, and this bill is limited to those particular cases and none other. It does not affect the larger issue, and obviously the larger issue cannot be considered in the form of amendments to this particular bill, which is meant to give an opportunity to the Commission of Inquiry to complete its task in those specific cases which have been entrusted to it.